the battery of the other microphone was off. Well, dead, I should say. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name is Bailey Yoder. I'm the Curator of Football Heritage of the Paul Brown Museum here at the Massillon Museum. I would like to thank everybody for joining us this evening for our History Happy Hour with Carter Strang. The museum would also like to thank our donors and supporters, including the Ohio Arts Council, Arts in Stark, and Visit Canton for helping to make all of our exhibitions and programs possible. Also make sure to thank your bartenders in our education department, Stephanie Toole and Kaylin Wrench. Also, the bar will be open for the duration of the program, so don't be shy. If you need a refill, go on up and get another drink. I've got a few items on display from the Paul Brown Museum collections. They are a Leo Strang era football uniform, an original Leaping Tire helmet decal, Leo Strang state championship wristwatch, and a Coach of the Year plaque awarded to Strang in 1959. The jersey number 75 was worn by Virgil Buckets in 1959 and 60, and Bob Profant in 1961 and 62. The helmet was worn by Green Eckert in 1962 and 63 and features 20 award stars on the back. The pants, unfortunately, I couldn't find the original wearer, although the name Jackson is written on the inside, so if anybody knows who that may have been, please let me know. That would be awesome. Leo E. Strang served as head coach of the Massillon Tiger football team from 1958 to 1963. He led the Tigers to 3 consecutive state titles in 59, 60, and 61, 2 national titles in 59 and 61, and a 7th place national ranking in 1960. He posted an 86.5% win-loss percentage with 54 wins, 8 losses, and 1 tie with the Tigers, and was 6-0 against Canton McKinley. 22 of his players were All-Ohio, and 14 were high school All-Americans. MaxPreps lists Strang as one of the nation's all-time 50 greatest high school football coaches. A football innovator, he pioneered the use of vinyl helmet team logos and award stickers, white shoes, which if anybody has a pair of original white cleats in their collection at home, the Massillon Museum would be grateful for your donation. Lost my place. A barefoot soccer-style kicker, a defensive analyzation circuit board to help call plays, summer conditioning, and a point-based playoff system. Strang, who was the 1959 Ohio High School Football Coach of the Year, is a member of the Ohio High School Football Coaches Hall of Fame. Our speaker this evening, Carter E. Strang, son of Leo Strang, is a leader in residence at Cleveland State University College of Law and a retired trial attorney. He is a graduate of Kent State University with Bachelor of Science and Master's in Education, where he was a member of the Honors College and the football and ice hockey teams. A teacher and coach prior to obtaining his Juris Doctorate at Cleveland State University Law, Carter is past president of the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Association, the Federal Bar Association, Northern District of Ohio Chapter, and the Cleveland Metropolitan Bar Foundation. Please join me in welcoming Carter Strang.
All right, well, thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. And I just want to say, the Massillon Museum, this is an absolute gem. It's just amazing. I can't wait to get a full tour of the museum. But it was so nice to be able to work with Bailey and Stephanie and Kaylin. So thank you very much. And this is jaw-dropping. I had no idea that any of the uniforms were around. And so we get those white shoes and maybe the socks and we'll be all set, right? But so thank you for that. I always loved coming back to Massillon. I left after 7th grade when my dad took the Kent State job. I always wanted to grow up to be a Tiger, so I was more than a little disappointed. But it's great to come back. I always considered myself a Tiger, and I know Dad felt that way, as he often said, once a Tiger, always a Tiger. As was said, Dad had not only 3 state championships, but he had 3 consecutive state championships and 2 national titles. High school coaching record, 109 wins, 26 losses, and 1 tie over 13 seasons. And as was mentioned, he pioneered uniform and coaching innovations is what we'll talk about, many of them. And many of those innovations started right here at Massillon. I know the Booster Club That's just a phenomenal website. It's just, when I began to do research for this presentation and for an article I mentioned, the part about Massillon was a lot easier than the other schools he was at, because you have a rich history and you've really done a good job of preserving it. So hats off to you for that as well. You have a section on Massillon verses, and so many of the things that Dad came up with, he came up with here at Massillon, and was the first to do those things of anybody in the country. And as mentioned too, MaxPreps in 2018 came up with a list of the 50 greatest high school football coaches of all time. And there were, not only was my father on it, but Massillon had the most coaches of any school in the United States. It had 3. So Paul Brown would be the 3rd. Chuck Brown. Ohio had the most of any state. They had 5. And you had to do the other 2. One just died recently. Jerry Faust. And Chuck Brown. Dad would have loved to have known that he was included in that list, but it really was, it's a tribute to Massillon. Those were great years, and I'm looking forward to walking down memory lane with so many of you, because you remember those years. And they were just a great time. This is the article that I recently wrote. It was on my bucket list of things to do when I retired. I heard so many great stories about my dad, and always wondered, are they all true, right? What's true, what's not true? Dad at times had a little bit of a tendency to exaggerate some things. He was a phenomenal salesman, a good recruiter as a college coach. And so I wasn't too sure when he told me about things he did in high school, things he did at some of the other schools, what was true and what wasn't true, and what was maybe unknown. So I decided to go back and write an article and really do the research. And so it's about 23 pages long. Thanks to Don for helping me get it on the Massillon Booster website. But we have a QR code for it, so if any of you would like to read it, it goes into much more detail than I'm going to be able to do today about his coaching career. But there's a QR code for it, and also, if you go to the Massillon Tiger Football Booster website, under miscellaneous history, you'll see the Leo Strang story. You hit that, and you'll get the link to the full article. Dad was a 4-year letterman that says, first team All-Ohio 1942, and let's keep something in mind. Back then, as you know, there was only one division. So for a kid from Ashland to be All-State was pretty unusual. He was their second All-Ohio player of all time back in 1942. Was being recruited. His sister, my aunt, kept a notebook of his clippings from his high school career and college career. And in there were letters to him from the Ohio State University, University of Georgia, and Washington University, trying to recruit him. So in addition to being an outstanding football player, he was a multi-sport athlete. He set the school's single-game baseball strikeout record, which still stands at 19 strikeouts in the game. He set the school's shot put record that stood for almost 3 decades. And he set the school's place kicking record that stood for 26 years. A little story about that. When he came to Massillon, he did a little trick at practice. And it's referenced, again, you have done a phenomenal job of preserving your history. Ron Swartz gave me this book, and much of what's in the article came out of it, but A Century of Heroes. And in there, it talks about Dad's demonstrating to his Massillon players his kicking expertise and what he would do. And I saw it. I really had trouble believing what I saw. But he would set the ball up on a tee. He would say to the players, just go running up and kicking that. That's no big deal. Anybody can do that. Watch this. And he would run up to him. And as he got close, he would do a complete spin around and kick it with the back of his heel, and it went through the goalpost. Quite the high school athlete, but 1942, he was going in the military, and he served his country in the U.S. Navy on a destroyer escort in the South Pacific. While in the Navy, he met my mother, Betty Burrell. They met in San Francisco at the USO Stage Door Canteen. Obviously, he was a great salesman because he got her to leave San Francisco and move to Ashland, Ohio. Not easy. He attended Ashland University. When he came back, he didn't want to go anywhere but home. He was completely homesick and never, ever wanted to be on a ship again. And he was a two-star athlete and star at what was then Ashland College and is now Ashland University. He went on the GI Bill. He came from a poor family. He never would have ever been able to go to college but for that. Not a particularly good student. He was very bright. I always thought maybe he had a dyslexia issue. But having married my mom really helped because she really did a good job on research papers. And it was kind of an open thing because my mother said several times my dad would get papers back and it would say, A-, good job, Betty. And unusual for football coaches to major, as he did, in art in college. And that was a lot of what you see with his uniform designs, was the use of his art background. So his first coaching job, and coaching jobs were very hard to get, as was housing after World War II, was at Caldwell High School down in Noble County, down in the Appalachian section of Ohio. He was there 1 year, and his team was 5-4. He then went to Upper Sandusky High School up in Northwest Ohio. There from 51 to 55. He was 35-10-0, 3 conference titles. His 1955 team was 9-0 and was ranked 9th in the final poll, which again, there's only one division back then, so that was Massillon McKinley and those schools that had it. In 1956, he was hired to be the head coach at East Cleveland Shaw High School. There, he took them to their first league titles, 2 Lake Erie Conference titles. He was 16-3. In 1957, they were 9-1 and finished 8th in the final state poll. And this is where he really began the showmanship. Let's give him a show, is what he would say. And he did that beginning at East Cleveland Shaw and then really ramping it up when he came here. He had the nation's first barefooted soccer-style place kicker, Muriel Gerhardt. He had pre-game warm-ups to the school band. His uniform designs included red kangaroo leather shoes, fluorescent black and red stars on the helmets, and colorful interchangeable jerseys and pants. Here's Muriel Gerhardt. You can see Dad. Anybody recognize the guy to the far right? That's Woody Hayes. Woody Hayes was a speaker at the 57 banquet, and there he is with Mario, and you can see they bronzed Mario's foot. Mario's in his mid-80s. He is Ohio's, has the most wins in Ohio of any soccer coach. He went to U.S. Naval Academy, where he played on the soccer team. And funny thing how this happened, Dad saw him kicking in gym class. And kicking soccer style was something people didn't do. He was a refugee from Austria. And Dad couldn't believe how well he kicked. Took him out to the field and said, "Do you think you can kick a football?" And the guy said, "What's a football?" Right? He kicked with his shoe on for a while. And Dad said, "You know, that's pretty good. I think you can do it with your shoe off because that would really bring in the crowds." And he said, "I'll give it a try because that's how I used to kick in Austria because a lot of the kids couldn't afford shoes." And he actually found that he kicked better barefooted. So that's what he did. It was quite the sight seeing him run out onto the field in the snow in the winter. And the very first time that he actually went out and kicked, the other team was so shocked that they didn't even try to block it. They just stood there with their hands on their hips. Because no one had seen a soccer-style kicker, much less one with a barefoot. At Shaw, Dad also had this all-pro Super Bowl champ, and that's Tom Manning. He quarterbacked at Ohio State and also was a Heisman nominee. Massillon High School, 1958 to 1963. No coincidence that he ended up here. When he was in high school, and Paul Brown was the Massillon coach, when Dad was in high school, his Ashland coach said, "We're going to see how the big boys do it," and brought the whole team to watch a practice. And Dad was totally impressed with the organization of that practice and how Paul Brown organized his team in his practice. And when he was a coach at Upper Sandusky High School, he told his coaches and players, "Someday I'm going to coach the Massillon Tigers." One of his players was Dale Walderhouse, who later became his assistant. Of course, we have Joe here today. So they were able to continue that great relationship here at Massillon as well. During his 3 consecutive state title years, during those 3 years, the Tigers were 31-1 and outscored their opponents, and I had to double check this because I had trouble believing it, 1,111 to 203. He was the only Massillon coach to go 11-0 during the regular season, and he holds a record for the most rushing yards in the game, appropriately against Canton McKinley, and that was 501 yards in 1960. Unbroken record still. And he had 25 shutouts, so the defense was good as well. And that was after a Canton McKinley victory. 6-0 against the Bulldogs. He had the largest point differential in a McKinley game. That record still stands. That's 40-0. He was the only coach to beat McKinley twice during the regular season. In 1963, we played McKinley twice because in 1962 they got caught recruiting players and were suspended, weren't allowed to play that season. We ended up playing Canton Lincoln instead. For years, I never had any clothing that was red and black. You just didn't do that in Massillon. Here he is with the state and national title trophies. He had 22 All-Ohio players. He had 14 high school All-Americans, and 2 of his players were college All-Americans. The 14 high school All-Americans is a statistic that doesn't exist on the Booster Club website. And so I was able to find that through searching old newspaper articles during that period at Massillon Evening Independent. So it would be great if someone could build on that and add to that list.
It's in there.
It is?
It doesn't sing a lot of coaches.
Oh, okay. Okay. I overlooked it then. It would have saved me a lot of work.
We're working on that.
Okay. So, what was Dad like? Described as a ball of fire, forthright, ambitious. Oh, he was ambitious. Confident and colorful. He also had a sense of humor. So, in 1961, Massillon had a 20-game winning streak. One of the longest it's had during the regular season. And they played Warren, and it was a back-and-forth game. I think the league changed 4 or 5 times. Warren ended up winning by a point. Come Monday, it's Booster Club meeting time. The Booster Club meetings consisted of showing the movies, the game film, the coach would show it, the head coach, and then take questions. And the questions were often difficult, even when we won. So Dad was not looking forward to this Booster Club meeting. So he had Nick Cosa start the meeting and show the film. And everybody's going, "Where's Leo?" Well, what Dad did was he dressed up in a complete head-to-toe disguise. He had a bunny hat, he had a fake beard, he had a big trench coat, and he sat in the back, and no one knew who it was. And so when Coso turned the projector off and turned the lights out to take questions, Dad got up from the back and began to walk down the aisle. And as he did, he began shedding his disguise. And everybody, once they figured out what was going on, just howled. And Dad said, it worked. I didn't get one tough question. At another Booster Club meeting, anybody recognize him? Art Hastings. Now, Art was one of those All-Americans, a phenomenal player, but a little small for college. He ended up going to, I think, Morehouse and playing there. But what a player. So, Dad's showing the movie, not of the board game, at the Booster Club meeting, and Art Hastings has the ball. And Art goes to the right, and he stopped. He's hit by a linebacker. He goes down and almost hits the ground, puts his hand down, recovers, goes back the other direction. He's hit by the safety. Looks like he's going down. He recovers his balance. He cuts back, goes against the grain, and runs 60 yards for a touchdown. Then turns on the lights, looks at the Booster Club members and said, gentlemen, now that is good coaching. He was blessed to have talent. And of course, a key to any public school having success in any sport is having a feeder system. And that really made all of the difference. It was never a question who you would have at quarterback, who would be the backup. So that was part of that Paul Brown organization that really paid off. Now I have a front row to Dad's Massillon years, first grade through 7th, and I was a part of it all. I would go to practices in the summer. I would have lunch with players. I had to convince them first that I wasn't spying on them for my dad. And so here we are, just at the point where we have moved to Massillon. That's my brother David on the left. Mom was a great coach's wife. Every Sunday night, the entire coaching staff would come to the house, and she'd cook for all of them. Every Sunday night. And they would be there for hours. We lived at 818 17th Street, which was then called the Coach's House. Anybody know why? We bought the house from the Trussell family. And the Trussell family bought the house from my Mom Harper. Oh, is that right? Wow. So it's called the Coach's House. And I remember when we came to Massillon to look at the house, the Trussell boys all showed me around the neighborhood. Little did I know when to go on to be the coach, right? And of course, Lee had great years as coach at Walden Walls. I was even involved with my brother and the other coaches' kids in one of the halftime shows. That's my brother. I'm on the far right, and he's next to me. That's Rob Boy behind me, and I think there's I can't remember who else. I think one of those is a co-sub. So it was great. And one of the things that my father had me do, I sat on the bench during games. So I sat on the bench during the games, and one of Dad's innovations, he had a number of them, and one of them was he had a hole drilled in the scoreboard, and he had a man placed up there with a jerry-rigged Instamatic camera, and the guy would take pictures so we could see the line splits of the opposing team, and there would be a signal then given to my dad on the sideline when the pictures were done, and the pictures would be lowered by a rope, and someone would go grab those and take them back to my dad on the sideline so he could look at them in real time. And that was my job. I would run with the Instamatic photos, and that was great. It very much helped the team until the Iowa Athletic Association found out about it and said, you can't do that. But again, coaching innovation. Another one was a defensive analyzation circuit board that the assistant coaches ran from the press box. And there was a big 1961, I have, here it is. This is Sports Illustrated 1961 feature article about Massillon football. And they talk about the defensive analyzation football from the cradle, Massillon football. And they talk about the defensive analyzation circuit board. This is pre-laptop for sure. No one else had anything like this, but they would be able to put on the circuit board what the defense was, and it would suggest the best offensive play to run. So another innovation here at Massillon. Of course, the uniform innovations. The first V-neck jerseys, the first white shoes, and helmet logos, and also, of course, the award stickers. No one had ever done that either. The white shoes were introduced in 1959. The players swore it made them run faster. And Dad would threaten to take them away if they didn't have a good game. The Leaping Tiger logo was first used in 1959. It was based off a Chevrolet marketing campaign. Fortunately, Dad didn't get sued for patent infringement on that one. And it was wonderful to see them still being used. Of course, we had interchangeable jerseys and pants so that the players never had to wear the same uniform twice in a season. Dad believed if you look good, you play good. And that extended off the field as well. Oops. You can see this is from the Massillon McKinley game, and you can see the all orange outfits. Now, you can tell what year this is because look at the shoes. It's 1963. I don't know why, but he went away from white shoes his last year here. And we were trying to figure out, and still don't know, the other years when he used white shoes. I don't believe those came from the factory white. I think they were painted, basically. But no one else did that. This is years before Namath made the use of white shoes popular. And he was the first to use to award outstanding play with black stars for helmets. So when they would be down in the basement on that Sunday night, they had a very sophisticated scoring system, and you would get stars for certain outstanding play. And the kids really, really wanted those stars. And of course, you can see them on this helmet. They're on the back, about 20 or 30, so that must have been a heck of a player. And looking good on the field was important, but looking good off the field was as well. And just like the coaching staff, all the players had blazers, and they wore ties with an OB on it. Here they're getting blood on us to go down to watch an Ohio State football game. Great coaching staff. Left to right there, you have Jack Robb, who later followed Dad on to Kent State. You have Nick Koso, who also followed Dad to Kent State and was an assistant with him at East Cleveland Shaw. And then you have Frank DeMocus standing to the left. And Frank went on afterward to be the coach at West Geauga High School in my senior year at Kent Roosevelt, where I was quarterback and what they call monster back, which is a defensive back. Our opening game was West Geauga High School, coached by DeMocus, and I had to play against my father's offense, which was very difficult to get ready for in a week because most teams didn't run an unbalanced line, and you can't play it just like you can play any other offense. Of course, you have Nick Rotas, and there's Dale. And all of these men seem so old to me. I look at them. Isn't that funny? And of course, Dad and then Ducky Schroeder, which I can't smell a cigar and not think of Ducky. Just chain smoking cigars. But what a great guy he was, he and Ducky. At Massillon, he had many great players. Bob Vogel, 1958, High School All-American, Ohio State All-American, Super Bowl champion with the Baltimore Colts, 5-time All-Pro, the blindside tackle for Johnny Unitas. He came to Massillon his senior year. He had played at a bunch of schools, different schools along the Ohio River Valley. He didn't get very good coaching. He knew that, and he wanted to go on to big time. And so he and his father were looking for a school to go to, and they went to watch Steubenville play. They thought that would be the school to go to because it was relatively close, and that was big time football. But Steubenville that night was playing the Massillon Tigers, and we kicked their butt. And so he really got interested, and he came here. His father found a job in Massillon. But it's been said that he came to Massillon with NFL talent, but Pop Warner technique. Vogel said, at my other schools, I basically got no coaching. I was getting by on pure ability. Working for Strang was a dramatic difference in terms of what his expectations were. It got me really ready for college and for the NFL. And of course, Joe Sparman, All-Ohio quarterback on Dad's 1959 state and national championship team. And he had an edge to him. He told a reporter that the best team, the Tigers, the Massillon Tigers, faced all season in 1959 was their second team. And he said that right before they played McKinley. He quarterbacked Ohio State to a Big Ten title and an 8-0-1 finish in 1961, but he also played baseball at Ohio State, which was well in contention with Mr. Woody Hayes. So he stopped playing football and continued with baseball. And he signed with the Detroit Tigers in 1963 and led them to a World Series championship in 1968. And Charlie Brown, 1961 high school All-American, Syracuse University All-American, played defensive back in the NFL for the Bears and the Buffalo Bills. And in the article, I profile about 12 or so of the top players from Massillon that he coached. Dad's dream always was to move on, and he always wanted to be a Division I football coach, and he got his opportunity in 1964 when the Kent State job opened. Trevor Reese had been the coach, who had a phenomenal career, but struggled his last 3 years, and they thought it was time to a change, and they wanted someone to make the program competitive again within the MAC. He was only the second high school football coach to ever jump directly to a major college Ohio football program, and the first was, of course, Paul Brown, who went to Ohio State from Massillon. Kent State had only 8 wins the prior 3 years. His team had a decidedly Massillon flavor. The 5 players from the 1963 Massillon high school team were recruited and played for Dad at Kent State. Eckert, Blunt, Swartz, Perry, and Taro. And of course, as I mentioned, 3 former assistant coaches, Lillick, Robb, and Koso. He had the first winning season in half a decade and the longest unbeaten streak at Kent State since 1956. His win-loss percentage is one that only one Kent coach has surpassed since 1967 that's had an equal or greater tenure at Kent. And of course, that was a Tiger too. That was Don James, who had a win percentage just above 500, and Dad's was just a little bit before. Dad had 13 players drafted into the NFL, a Kent State record, and 7 went on to play pro ball. Jim Corgill actually was Kent State's first major college All-American, and NCAA All-American, and went on to coach at Kent State after a CFL All-Pro career, and he's now a member of the CFL Hall of Fame. He was second round draft pick of what was then the St. Louis Cardinals, but he's from Canada, and he wanted to go home and play in Canada. He also coached Don the Bowling Ball, Nottingham, and we had Dad recruited him at Kent. He had an advantage because Don grew up in Ravenna, Ohio, right next to Kent, was dating Coach Rob's daughter, Shelley, and they eventually married, so we had a real in on that one. Don was, I think, the last player drafted his senior year in the NFL draft, but he was determined he was going to make it and played for Baltimore and then for Miami, and was called the Human Bowling Ball by Howard Cosell. That's where that nickname came '67 season, after consecutive wins over Louisville, Marshall, and Xavier, Kent State's created the Leo Strang Award in his honor, given to an upperclassman with the highest GPA. He went into administration at Kent, became a successful businessman. He died in 1996 at the age of 73. He always loved Massillon, as I said, and frequently said this is all he wanted to be remembered for. He wanted to be remembered as having coached some of Massillon's greatest teams. So there are a number of other things I can talk about. How we're doing on time.
You're pretty good. You still got like 20 minutes. If you
Good,
can carry on.
good, yeah. The 1960 North-South All-Star game, I don't know if any of you attended that game. Remember the score? I have the program, which I'm going to donate to the museum. Here it is. Dad was the coach of the North. I think there were 4 or 5, I'll be right here, heavily stocked with Massillon players. Sparma was the quarterback. The player of the game was a guy from Warren named Paul Warfield. He did pretty well after that. And interestingly, when you look at the South program, it had a probable starting lineup at quarterback. There was a guy named Ankney was listed as the probable quarterback. Also on that roster from Cincinnati was a guy named Roger Staubach. I thought, how could Roger Staubach not be the starter for the South High School team? And then I looked and saw who the head coach was for the South High School All-Stars. Acme. So, at any rate, that was a thrill to win that game and to coach against and coach for people who went on to be just great Hall of Famers in the NFL. You know, of course, everything was by polls back then, which put a lot of pressure on you. You had to play the top teams in the state to advance in the polls. And if you lost, it was really hard to be state champion. Now, we did it in 1960. We lost to Warren and still won the state championship. It was really hard. And Dad and many of the other coaches wanted to get rid of that system. And Dad, on behalf of the Coaches Association, lobbied the Ohio State High School Association to get rid of that system and have a playoff system, a point-based playoff system. So that was in 1963 that he went to the Ohio State Association and pitched this. Obviously, it didn't happen for a few years after, but he was on the ground floor of that. One of the things that I recall as a child was not fun at Massillon. I gotta confess that. When we lost, which wasn't frequent, I would be the first up on Saturday mornings. I'll use my teaching voice. So I was the first one up on a Saturday morning to get the newspaper. Right? Whenever we lost, what was in the for sale sign? It was like, well, this is kind of a joke, but maybe not really. I don't. Hopefully, we don't continue that. But and then one time, I went to open the front door, and I couldn't open it from the front, and I couldn't understand what was going on. The front door would not open, and I went out the side and looked around. The Blarney Stone. So, of course, now it's a parking lot, right? But where the practice football field used to be, there was a huge hill at the west end. And at the top of that hill was a Blarney Stone. And the players, for conditioning, had to run up that hill around the Blarney Stone, up that hill around the back down. And this is back in the summer, 2 practices a day, where they wore really heavy jerseys. And they felt that giving you water was not a good idea. So the players had their last lap. I assume it was the players, but someone dug that thing up. It had to be 10 foot tall because it was very, and that was on the front door. How my dad got rid of it, I have no idea. But that was quite the shock. I want to talk a little bit about the competition with Niles. McKinley. Dad was pretty sharp. I think he got taken by Tony Mason because Massillon didn't have Niles McKinley's schedule on their schedule. And so Tony Mason proposed to Dad that they just have a friendly summer scrimmage. So Dad said, sure. And I've got the article where they talk about the scrimmage, and Dad said, you know, it's a scrimmage. We're going to play all of our players. This isn't a state title game. It's a scrimmage. Well, Tony Mason didn't buy that. I went to the game. I don't know if any of you were there. They had their band there. This is the middle of the summer. They had it like a game. The stands were full. They came out in their game uniforms. And they played their first string. And they won. So, what happened that year? 1961. Actually, it started in 1960. Dad began scheduling 11 games. Other schools didn't do that. So 1960, 61, and 62, Massillon played 11 games in the regular season. In 1961, they won 11-0. And they did not win the Associated Press state title. Who did? Niles, who only played 10 games and didn't play anywhere close to the same competition. But they beat Massillon in the scrimmage, so they got the nod. But fortunately back then, there were two wire services. The other was the UPI. And Massillon won the UPI. And at the end of the year, there is a poll for the best high school program in the nation, and Massillon won that. So we got the last stop. The interesting thing was the Niles newspaper was UPI, and the Massillon paper was AP. So in Niles, everybody read that Massillon was the state champion, and just the opposite of Massillon. Tony, I don't know if you ever met Tony, but he was quite a character. He and Dad finally said, we'll settle this and we'll schedule the game. And that was scheduled in 1964 at the Akron Rubber Bowl, and the irony is neither of them were there to coach their teams. Dad went on to Kent State, and Tony went on to the University of Michigan. One of the things that Dad tried, a number of things he tried didn't work. One of them was snap-off jerseys. So the tearaway, remember those? The Browns did that for a long time before the NFL banned it, where you'd grab the jersey, and if you pull too hard, you'd just get a piece of the jersey. So Dad thought that was a great idea, but he didn't want to pay for new jerseys all the time. So he came up with the idea of snap-off. So you had panels that were snapped together. So if you grabbed it, it'd have the same effect. You'd just get this piece, but you'd be able to snap it back on. And the Ohio Athletic Association put the kibosh to that and wouldn't permit it. Also, he wanted to play post-season games. There was no playoffs, but he wanted to go out and play a team from Miami that was claiming to be the best team in the nation. Not permitted by the Ohio Athletic Association either. One thing he did convince them to do was summer conditioning. He began that at Massillon, and he convinced the Ohio Athletic Association that it would lead to less injuries because kids would be more prepared and in better shape when summer football actually began rather than having all those months with no football. So he had a lot to do with that. He was the father of that actual NLB All-American Conference. He was a leader in the creation of the All-American Conference, which was the best high school conference, certainly in Ohio, if not in America. Massillon, Niles, McKinley, Alliance, Warren, and Steubenville. And it lasted from 63 to 78. Dad was in it 1 year, and Massillon won in that year. In terms of coaching, one of the coaching innovations was area coaching. So instead of saying you're the end coach, you're the tackle coach, you're the guard coach, he would have the coaches coached by area of the line. So he would say, you know, you're looking at the same area when you're grading film and you're watching practice. So he would have the right side tackle and end coach. And then he would have the short side tackle and end coach would be somewhat different. So it would be based on the position of the players rather than whether they were a guard or tackle or what they were. He also used, as I said, the unbalanced line with the wing tee, and used rule and influence blocking. So rule blocking is that for every play, you have a rule that you've memorized for that play. And no matter what defense they throw up, you follow your rule. So if you're a right guard and your play is 32 power right, your rule is in on linebacker. So you get in your stance and you look, is there someone in the gap to my left? If so, I block it. If not, what's the next rule? On, is there someone that nose up? I take him. If there's no one in the gap or on, then I go search the nearest linebacker. He also used influence blocking, which is pretty wild. So defensive backs would often cue on certain players. So if it was going to be a sweep to the right, your guards would pull to the right. So if you're a defensive back, you would key on those guards. And when you saw them leaving and going to the right, you would go to the right? To try to cut it off. So Dad, having seen this, began to use influence blocking, which is to have the guards go the opposite direction. And he said it was the darndest thing to see the guards pull to the left, the play go to the right, and the defensive backfield and linebackers for the other team still running to the left because they were following the keys that were false keys. He was the only high school player that was included in the Eastman Kodak Speaker Series. And these were the top college coaches, Bear Bryant and others. And they went on a tour all around the country. And Dad said the crazy thing was these were high school coaches mostly that would come. And he said he got the largest crowds. And he says it had nothing to do with me. It had to do with the fact that I was from Massillon, and these were high school coaches, and they had all heard of Massillon, and they wanted to learn what the secret was. And so he had some interesting insights which are in the article about some of the coaches. Because he spent a lot of leisure time with them. He said Bear Bryant was a great guy. Dad was quite the poker player. He won a number of tournaments in Vegas in his retiring years. And he would play poker. They'd all play poker on their free time. He said Bear Bryant was a great coach. Terrible poker player. Won a lot of money on there. So in terms of individual seasons, I'll wrap it up with that. 58, 8, 1, and 1. As we mentioned, 4th in Ohio. They ended Benedictines. Benedictine was the state champ the year before. They had an 18-game winning streak, and that 58 team beat them. 59, of course, was 10-1. The 60 team, that was the first 11-game season. They were 10-1, still finished first, and of course 61-11-1 as well. One of the things that was a problem for the 11-0 team too, in addition to that scrimmage against Niles, was the last 2 games of the season, number 10 and number 11. Number 10 was against Parma Senior High School at Cleveland Brown Stadium. It was cold as could be. And as I recall, the older I get, the things I remember best are things that never really happened. So this might not be true, but we were down, I think, 20-6 at halftime, and won 21-20. And then the last game was against Canton, and they were having an average season, and we won, I think it was 7-6 on a goal line stand. They decided to go to 2-2 and didn't make it. So that might have influenced the state polls. I don't know, but it was a great team. And the 1962 team, let me talk briefly about that. 6-5. So it's great to be at Massillon when you're winning, but it can be really tough if you're not. And so Dad knew we didn't have a lot of good players back. He grabbed a lot of players. One starter died in a train accident during the summer. Another one, Floyd Pierce, I believe it was, had a heart condition and was told he couldn't play the whole season. And then they lost 2 kids whose dads got jobs in other cities. So already depleted, he knew it was going to be a tough season. What we didn't know as a family is how we're going to be received and treated when it wouldn't be a great season. Fortunately, again, 6-5, continuing the winning streak in terms of having seasons that are winning seasons. That's one thing Dad always appreciated, and we always appreciate, is the fact that Massillon was great that year. They all understood, they were very understanding, all the fans, the boosters, everybody, that we were doing the best we could in that situation, and we would bounce back. In 1963 they did, 9-1, and finished, I think, second in the state. They lost to Akron Garfield at the Rubber Bowl, and that was, I remember the game. Akron Garfield had a good team. They finished, I think, 7th in the state or so. They only had one loss that season. So those are our years at Massillon, treasured memories. And I would love to share any that you might have from that era of games, anything to do with my dad that comes to mind. So at this point, I'll open it up to questions and or comments from the audience. Thank you. Yes.
One thing I
Yes.
wanted to say, when we moved here in 1958, your dad's first year,
Yes.
we came to town once a week. I thought we were from leave for meetings, but really I think there was some farm, someplace.
Oh, yes.
I never was told where that farm was. Let's stay.
This is before summer conditioning was permitted. Yes.
The kids were all raised here in this house, stays in this house.
The farm. Yeah. So before summer, this is my recollection is before summer conditioning was approved. He said, "The heck with it, we're going to have summer conditioning," and he found a farm and took the kids out there and they practiced. Right? As I said, he was a competitor and he was going to win. The other thing I remember, of course, about the water house is you were going to stay for just a short time. Is that what your husband told you? 2 years, right? Yeah, he kind of rounded up a little bit. Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
They played football when he first came, and they put out in.
They did have spring football. Yeah, they had spring football, and that's why the junior high, the national governing body for high school football certified schools, but they wouldn't certify schools that had junior high football, spring practice. So he had spring practice, but only, as I recall, to junior high level. I don't think they had it at the high school level, because that wasn't permitted by the Ohio High School Association.
That ended after 55 seasons.
Yeah.
Part of the agreement joining the OSSAA was that the junior highs didn't join, so we had spring ball.
Okay. Because I remember doing spring ball at Longfellow Junior High School with Earl Bruce coming in, which is a weird situation, because we didn't move until the end of the school year. He got the job in January of '64, and we stayed until the school year was over, and so I'm there playing under the Earl Bruce system and doing spring football in junior high, which you talk to anybody from any other school system today, they go, what? You were doing spring football in junior high school? Yeah, well, that's massive, right? Yeah. Anybody else? Yes?
Okay, you lived in kind of the neighborhood I grew up in. Do you remember the Baszlers?
Oh, my God, yes.
Do you,
Yes.
Do you have any, I mean, I have great memories in case.
Great memories.
What are your memories in case you want?
So one of, actually, let me see if it's this one. So I brought, there are actually 2 Sports Illustrated that Massillon was profiled. And here it is. Here's the basement, the basement. It was a museum. Before this existed, it was a museum. It was just unbelievable. It was so unbelievable that it's in the Sports Illustrated, right? The basement. Among their souvenirs sit Katie and Maury Basler, ardent Massillon rooters. On the walls of their net are pictures of past teams and individual heroes. Rugs, ashtrays, curtains, pillows, and glasses decorated with tigers. Basler's Basler, is a leading member of the Sideliners. And so I remember that very well. And we had as we lived, they would basically go to our backyard. That's where their house was. And before every game, we had a ritual, and that was my brother and I would go over to the base of their house, and they would have a wine jug that they put a candle in, and they would melt, they would have the candle drip, and you would take tweezers, and you'd take a $1/2 or a quarter, heat it, and then put it in the wax. And that was a good luck for the Tigers to win.
I think I remember seeing that.
Yeah. So the bases were great. Yeah, I remember them very well.